an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Raybearer, chapters 1 through 4. In these chapters, we get to meet Tarisai. I am hoping I'm saying her name correctly. And find out that her situation is pretty fucking grim, man. This is a bummer. I wasn't ready for that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. Ashleigh is here in the chat. Ashleigh says that's how it's pronounced in the audiobook. Oh, you know what? I got the audiobook. I just didn't use that this time around. But yeah, that's what I should have done, is listen to that to make sure that I knew how to pronounce things. But yeah, I did get it. So, because Ashleigh is saying the audiobook is really well done. Good note. It's really frustrating because sometimes they mispronounce stuff in the audiobooks also, but I feel like more modern audiobooks, they are careful to check with authors and stuff, whereas things are mispronounced more in older audiobooks that were recorded, like 15, 20 years ago, before audiobooks really started to completely take off the way that they have. But yeah, I like to start new books by actually reading the text because I feel like it helps embed names in my mind a little bit better and give me a more I have the word as an image in my head that I can pull up to remind me of something, whereas it doesn't seem to stick as well initially with an audiobook. And speaking of, Ashleigh, I just want to make sure I did chapters 1 through 4. It says in my Kindle version that was only 40 pages. It felt like longer than 40 pages to me, but I don't know if the Kindle's just incorrect or if it was just that she managed to pack so much in that felt like more to me because of that. But I just wanted to double check that the 40 pages for you seems about accurate or not 40 pages, 4 chapters. But I initially tried to go by page numbers, but I stopped. I was supposed to stop at, I think I said to myself, chapter 7. And that seemed like so much had already happened by the end of chapter 4. I stopped there instead because I really was like, I'm not going to be able to talk about everything adequately. Okay, Ashleigh says, don't have the physical copy with me to check, but it sounds okay. All right, and I will double check because Ashleigh has pre-booked the whole book, so I don't want to wind up, with 80 pages left in the last episode and wind up having to rush or cram things in. So I will check out what the page listing is on Amazon for the physical book and see if it matches. So, okay, first of all, I want to say, I am into it. I am very excited about this book. The universe that she has built here is very vivid. It feels real in a way that isn't easy to do. If anybody out there has tried writing their own stories, you know how hard world building can be. You can see things clearly in your head, but getting that across, And there have been books I've read where I will be reading it and I know what they're trying to do, but all I can see are the seams. It's sort of like watching a made for TV movie versus an actual movie where the costumes aren't great. The sets aren't super convincing. That kind of feel, but mentally. And that is not an issue here at all. Also, she really plunges you fucking headfirst into a kind of wild what's the word I want? This is not a scenario that we are used to with, I'm going to call this YA. I feel like it's considered YA. But YA, there's always the, I'm a gifted kid who has powers beyond our dreams, but I seem so ordinary, and it's a total surprise that I have these abilities, and I'm being plunged into a world of magic and intrigue that I didn't ask for, but my powers require me to be part of it. And it's all sort of either accidental due to like circumstances, or it's due to my parents and who they are, and me like inadvertently being part of an overall either prophecy or grudge or something like that, right? That is the thing. And to a degree, that's what's happening here, like a little bit, but it's not by chance, any of it, which is what I find much more exciting. All of this is purposeful and orchestrated by the lady, her mother, in a way that I find much, much more interesting. Things being circumstantial. I mean, obviously, if we look at like the biggest example of this that's pop culture, Harry Potter, that was orchestrated to a degree, but we don't find out until much, much later how much of it was orchestrated. And part of me doesn't entirely believe how much of that is orchestrated as JK tries to pretend, because sometimes I think she retcons some of that. It's fine. It doesn't really matter. But in the moment when you're reading it, Harry being a wizard and this thing being hidden from him and what happened to his parents, they were casualties. It was an accident. Him like being told that he isn't a wizard is just because of some like petty assholes. All of that just feels like he just had some weird bad luck. This is a girl literally engineered before her birth to be something, which feels it's such a violation, and it's so dehumanizing. And that I say that understanding that she isn't fully human, apparently. Nevertheless, she doesn't really understand that about herself. She doesn't seem to grasp what that means yet. She's very young. She's 11, I think. And I just really... Oh, sorry. Ashleigh says, off the back of Christopher Paolini, I don't know if it comes off as impressive as it is, but she started writing this in high school because she was sick of seeing Marvel and other magic-y material with no people of color. Thank you, Ashleigh. I had meant to mention the dedication because I shared that on Instagram. It says, for the kids scanning fairy tales for a hero with a face like theirs, and for the girls whose stories we compressed into pities and wonders, triumphs and cautions without asking even once for their names. I'll tell you what, that got to me a little bit, guys. Something about that not asking even once for their names. Whew. You know, just as a woman, that is true. And I cannot imagine how much more true it is for a black woman. Like, yeah, it's just, we are erased. You know, women in general tend to be erased, and black women are erased so much more. And that just got me very emotional right from the get-go. And I kind of strapped in and was like, okay, we're not playing. Let's go. So backing up from what I was saying about her being engineered, I'm going to talk about Tarisai and what she finds out. So this all begins with her living in a circumstance that feels like she's royalty. And yet there's a lot of little oddities that make you go, wait, what? It felt a little bit like an A24 horror movie, a little bit, where on the surface, for example, Midsommar, it's like drenched in sunlight and everything is like really simple and beautiful and welcoming. And then you keep running into like little things here and there where you're like, wait, that seems bad. That's not welcoming. Why is that happening? And eventually you get to the whole like gross story underneath and you're like, oh my God. So First of all, fairies exist, and she sees them over, like, their flecks of light dancing above these elephants that are passing by her window. We find out later that the windows wind up getting nailed shut because she overhears some shit that she's not supposed to. And the lights are what her tutor calls tutsu sprites, kind spirits. They guide lost elephants to watering holes. Or to lion packs, another tutor muttered, if they're feeling less kind. And this is one of those where, like, if it wasn't mentioned that she saw them, I would think that this was folklore. But this is real. This is happening here. Magic, I soon learned, was capricious. When I squinted at the swollen trunk of our courtyard boab tree, a cheeky face appeared. Kai Kai, killer girl, it snickered before vanishing into the bark. What the fuck? Because she is killer girl. That's what she's been made for. What is showing up in the trunk of this tree that, like, knows that already? What? Who are you? I don't like it. I'm on record. I was 7 when the man with cobalt fire wings found me. That night, I had decided to search Swana, the second largest realm in the Erit Empire, for my mother. So she goes out and tries to find him, and he basically grips her up and is like, the fuck are you doing? And she tries to get away and tells him that she's not allowed to be touched. You're small enough to be carried. I am told human children need affection. Well, I'm not human, so put me down. Who told you that? No one, I admitted after a pause, but they all say it behind my back. So, as it turns out, she has this ability, what is it called? Telemetry? Is that how you say that? Where you can touch an object and see its history. Which, this is a frequent superpower. You know, you see this a lot. And it can be used in wildly different ways, which I always find interesting to see how an author decides they're going to handle it, depending on who is writing it. For example, here, she can't feel their feelings. We have a moment later on where she touches a sash that has been worn by a bunch of other children before her, and she sees them, like, putting it away and their hands are shaking, so she can tell something has upset them, but she can't tell whether it's excitement or nervousness or fear. So she is able to get a visual, but she can't seem to get, like, an emotional sort of read on it, which I thought was a nice limitation. Not that I have a problem when people can get an emotional read as well, but clearly this little girl is dealing with a lot of power already. So I think giving some boundaries to that is smart, you know? And also perhaps she may, like, get to the point where she can read it emotionally later on, and it leaves a little bit of room for development of that. So he asks, would you like to see your mother, Tarisai? And she says, do you know where she is? And he says, I cannot find your mother, but I can show you a memory. And as she reaches for his head, he doesn't even, like, question why she's doing that. So evidently he knows about her ability. He says, not in my head. I never store secrets on my person, which is such a good line. So this is when we find out that she can see people's history when she touches them. And, you know, that is a pretty big violation if somebody hasn't agreed to that. So I can understand everybody just being like, yeah, I'd rather not. So he brings her over to this area and puts her down in this clearing. And he says, touch the ground here. This is where the story is. So she does that. And we see her mother. She reclines on a rock by the water. The sun makes a mosaic of her reflection, distorting her face. Her wrapper is frayed, her sandals worn to the soles. I worry, wondering, what were you running from, mother? She dips an emerald cuff into the water, murmurs over the jewel, kissing it tenderly, and the emerald glows and fades. Then she calls out, "Melu, won't you come out and play?" And there's no response. And FYI, Melu is the guy that she has been talking to, and Tarisai. And this memory has to do with him. So we get an impression here of the lady that isn't great. Now, what I find interesting is that later on, one of her companions, when she comes to visit, says something to her about how I believe in this cause. So she has a greater ambition. It's unclear what that is, and it could be valid. But seeing this little vignette is not looking awesome. First thing she does is she has this abiku blood, which I don't think that we are informed what abiku is, like if that is a creature. I'm assuming it's a creature because she says blood, but it's one of those things where, is that a figure of speech? It's clearly meant to be poisonous, and it would kill everything in like a 50-mile radius. And I'm assuming that Melu is meant to be the sort of like guardian of this area, and it would be, you know, just incredibly painful to him if this were to happen. So she blackmails him into putting a cuff on his own wrist to become her djinn and give her 3 wishes, which is already really fucked up. Like right away, you're just like, yikes. Okay. Like, and then the first wish she asks for is, "I wish for a stronghold that no one may see or hear unless I desire it. A place my friends and I will always be safe. A place befitting royalty. That is my first command." So earlier, we had heard her talking about how she would wave to little children outside her window, and they never waved back. And she sort of like felt, she describes it as they would look past me as if I wasn't there. And I thought perhaps they had been instructed to never wave back, but it's pretty extreme for children to listen to that degree, where even if they don't wave back, they'd usually make eye contact, and it would be clear they saw you. Because of the way it was described, I was like, I wonder if they can't see her. And then here it is. They clearly can't. That's purposeful. So Melu points to Bekina House, which is a mile away, and it's all set, all made already. And then she says, "I wish for Olugbade's death." And he says, "That's not allowed. I can't kill, like, we're not allowed to deal in life and death, and I definitely couldn't kill a Raybearer anyway." And she's kind of irritated, but also saw that coming. And then says, and this is super bone-chilling for me, "I wish for a child who will do, think, and feel as I tell it." It. She doesn't even care if it's like a boy or girl. She doesn't really like... Obviously, she does not see her child as fully human or a person anyway. Even setting aside the fact that her daughter is actually not fully human, even if she were, I don't think that she would see her as fully human. Because this being was brought about as a tool for her to use in her assassination attempt. So, "I wish for a child who will do, think, and feel as I tell it. An extension of myself. A gifted child, sure to stand out in a contest of talent. This is my second command." I'm sorry, but I'm personally very offended at how this is basically what so many people actually want when they have children. I'm not kidding, guys. Like, think about it. Think about the parents out there who really do want their children to be extensions of themselves. And when their children turn out to be full people who belong to themselves and are not property, those parents have such a hard time. And those kids often wind up acting out because they can tell they're being oppressed in a way, and trying to, like, there's an attempt to force them into a box, and they sense it. And it does not go well for anybody involved. The parents are disappointed, feel like they failed somehow. The kids feel like they failed their parent, even though that failure isn't anything that they were like, you know, they weren't attempting to achieve the thing their parent wanted. So the failure is more a failure to please than an actual failure. But that feels more terrible somehow. You know, like failing to reach an achievement, that's a disappointment, and you can be hard on yourself. But failing to please somebody who raised you, that is something you just can't really get away from. It's not like, oh, I can just try again. Or you can spend your whole life trying again and then waste your life on someone else. And that is in some ways what certain parents want, is for their kids to use up their life pleasing them, doing the things that they think are the right thing to do. So there was just a sort of subtext here that I was like, she's literally asking for something in language that a lot of people would find upsetting, but they would fail to see how much they also wanted this thing, even though they didn't say it in these words. And it's also part of why I don't want to have children, because I'm so worried about doing this to a kid. I have too many fears about like just putting my own bullshit on another creature, and I can barely handle my bullshit. I don't need to be spreading it around. So Milou says, I'm not allowed to do that either. I cannot force a human to love or hate. You may not own a child as you own an Eru. Can't I? What if my child was an Eru? What if my child was yours? And he's like, that's an abomination. And she says, no, no, no. Well, he says, you ask for an abomination. And she says, no, I command that abomination. And then they performed a ritual then, one I didn't understand at 7 years old. And I was like, oh my God, they have to actually have sex. I thought that he could like snap his fingers and it's done. She rapes him to get this child. This is so messed up, like right out of the gate. Holy shit. You know, like, ooh. So yeah, the lady whom she just admires and loves, she's not a good person. I mean, again, there's always context to things, but this doesn't feel like context is going to make it better. This just doesn't feel like I'm going to look back and be like, oh yeah, all of this was worthwhile. Never mind what she has done to her daughter by raising her the way that she has, which is a whole other issue. The lady's third ungranted wish, her abomination, ran through my veins. And he says, when she comes back out from this memory, do you understand now? Until you grant her third wish, neither you nor I will be free. I bargained with the lady for the privilege of naming you Tarisai. It is a Swana name. Behold what is coming. Your soul is hers for now, but your name, I insisted, must be your own. And he wraps her in his arms and carries her back to the gates of the palace and tells her, I would really love it if we could fulfill her wishes and then I would be free. But also, I know that whatever she asks of you isn't going to be great. So I sort of hope that she never actually fulfills her third wish at all. And Tarisai goes back to her home and tells them what she saw, which of course she would, because these are the only people that she has any contact with. She doesn't fully understand what she saw. Part of me wants to be like, oh my God, you don't share this. But I think as a child, I would have done the same thing. A reminder, she's 7 years old here. And she's been given everything in terms of physical care. She has a place that's safe to live. She has people to serve her. She's given food and education and exercise. However, socially, she is extremely stunted because she has never been amongst peers and doesn't know how to handle talking to people or what self-preservation is or why to worry about certain things. So yeah, she would just blurt it out. It was all a dream, the tutors said, but their dilated pupils and terse smiles told a different story. My adventure had confirmed their most sinister suspicions. My mother was the devil, and I, her puppet demon. Which, damn. So, then we get this bit here where she is attempting to hurt herself because she has figured out after falling into a fire that she can't die. She can like wind up breaking an arm or something, but she can't actually die. And she begins wildly experimenting with dangerous stuff that's making all of the tutors and servants like really anxious. I am assuming because they don't believe in the magic of this place. I'm not sure they realize that the place can't be seen from the outside. I don't really know what the servants know. It's unclear. We know that some of them disappear, like the tutors and stuff. If she fails, they vanish, and I have to assume they've been killed. So again, the lady is terrifying because it's like, I don't think that she would let anybody who taught this child walk away and re-enter a different city and teach someone else and be like free to talk about what they've seen. I don't see that happening. I think those tutors are all buried under the fucking castle. Like, no bueno. So, my tutors grew more relentless. The sooner they could make me into what the lady wanted, the sooner they would be rid of me. So, they begin to push her even harder. And she's been practically doing nothing but training in every sense all the time anyway. So eventually, there's this moment here where she overhears, well, first I'll give a little bit of, the background about a warlord named Inoba, who unleashed a power from the earth, uniting the lands into one massive continent. He had crowned himself emperor, enlisting 12 of the continent's rulers as his vassals. Then he battled the Abiku with his newly christened army of the 12 realms. So Abiku, that is the same word again, right? As the blood that she was going to pour that would poison the land. The mortal and immortal armies had been so evenly matched that Inoba's war dragged on for decades before at last the exhausted forces struck a truce. He was celebrated as Aritsar's savior. The continent rulers credited him for bringing peace, and so for centuries his line had ruled Aritsar from their home realm of Aluwan, uniting 12 cultures in a network of art, science, and trade. So, this is when we get the first song, which is describing like the various people. Heard merchant families singing of the empire, rocking infants on their hips. Alawan and Swana bring his drum, and it's all about the older brother, isn't he perfect? Aritsar's current older brother, or emperor, was Alugbade Kunlea, which is who her mother asked to die, but she was turned down because he can't do that. So then we get the next song. 11 danced around the throne, 11 moons in glory shone, they shone around the sun. But traitors rise and empires fall, and sun-ray sun will rule them all. Well, and all is said, oh, all is said, and done he, done he, done. And she sings it around one of the servants who is like, where the fuck did you hear that? And she tells them, and they nail all the windows shut. And she's like, what the fuck? That's literally the only contact I had with the outside world. I'll burn this entire motherfucker down because I won't die. All y'all will. But I don't give a shit. My tutors had blanched. There are things we simply can't teach you, they said, looking hunted as they bound my bloodied hands. It is forbidden. And this is one of those moments where I'm just like, they have to tie this kid up. Like, just the treatment that she is enduring here without understanding how barbarous it is. You know, she just has no other frame of reference to know how she should be treated as a child. And so she's just growing up thinking that this is like a normal way to be. And I find that more disturbing than anything. I mean, I guess she knows it's not a normal way to be if she's able to see what like other children are living like outside her window. But, you know, it's like the barest indication. So on her 11th birthday, significant, 11 just keeps on being significant. Her mom shows up with 2 friends and she calls her Maid of Me. She hummed that chilling lullaby, me, mine, she's me, and she is mine. Which is just, I hate it a lot. Friends, the lady said, please tell my daughter that you are her new permanent guardians. She seldom addressed me directly. When she did, her words were sparse and halting. I would later realize she was afraid of commanding me by accident. Afraid of wasting her third precious wish, which still lay dormant inside me. Which makes so much sense. And I love that this author thought of this. Like, it would be incredibly easy to misspeak and ruin everything. And that is a frequent bit when you're doing like the 3 wishes gags, is in stories they'll misuse the wish. They'll accidentally wish for something without really thinking about it and use it up, or they'll wish for something that they didn't actually really want, or they'll say it sarcastically. And I love that the author thought of that and decided to like acknowledge that that can happen and have this woman be intelligent enough to see that that mistake is possible and do something to sort of, and I also love that it's yet another way for her to distance herself from this child. It's just it's such a combination of things making this daughter figure worship this woman because she's so withholding without really understanding how dehumanizing this all is. And she is like, also it's mentioned how much alike they look and that Tarisai really likes that. She kind of finds that to be a comfort to her, that this woman that she admires and thinks is so beautiful, that she looks so much like her. And as it turns out, like, that's purposeful. She is meant to be a copy in a way. So yeah, she looks just like her. So there are 2 people here. The older stranger, a feline woman about the lady's age, was dressed entirely in green. Tawny brown skin contrasted with hard green eyes. Curly hair burst from beneath her cloak's hood, which she wore even in the heat. And Isokan, I realized. Isokan people had mixed blood, parents from different Arit realms. To hasten empire unity, the Kunleo Imperial Treasury rewarded families for every Isokan child born, which is a pretty wild concept. You're like encouraging people to just like reproduce with a different race for money, which could really backfire. I feel like the whole point is like to encourage unity. And I'm like, does that work? Her name is Kathleen, which I was not prepared for her to have such an ordinary name. And she says, I hope this creature won't be trouble. Does it have a name besides Maid of You? She says, does it have a name? Both of them treat her very much like an object. Kathleen calls her demon child like more than once. And she says to Kathleen in her native tongue what her name is and like an idiom that is meant to be like a well wish. And Kathleen is like, wow, she can speak that language too? Like, Jesus, what did you do to this kid? And the lady's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? They don't test children on different languages, Kathleen retorted. Not anymore. Every realm speaks Arit now. That's the point of being an empire. Only Arit citizens, droned the second stranger, take pride in their cultures being erased. And this guy, he scanned me with eyes like half moons, lifting a tan, angular jaw. A blue cape draped over his arm. Besides that, he wore nothing but trousers, and every inch of his body, face, arms, chest, and feet, was covered in what appeared to be geometric purple tattoos. I probably imagined it, but for a moment they seemed to glow. So it turns out this guy is from Songland. And what we find out is that there is a deal that the Emperor has cut. And I want to know how the fuck this happened. Their ancestors had refused to recognize Inoba as Emperor, and as a result, the tiny realm was excluded from Aritsar's bustling trade. A jagged range of mountains cut Songland off from the mainland. Aritsar might have ignored Songland altogether if not for the Redemptors. Inoba the Perfect had bought peace for our world at a steep price. Every year, 300 children were sent into the Uruku Breach, the last known entrance to the underworld. In exchange for this sacrifice, the Abiku refrained from ravaging human cities and villages. I'm sorry. What? The underworld, and the Abiku, I'm assuming, are demons, essentially, takes 300 children a year as sacrifice in exchange for not ravaging city. That feels like Inoba is not perfect at all. Call me crazy. Bad deal. I feel like this is not a thing to be like, oh, look at the good job I did, everybody. I figured it out. I mean, and it turns out these children, the markings on them are maps to the underworld. And that is how you know which kids are being sacrificed. It's not like a lottery system, like, Hunger Games or something where it's random. You are marked from birth as being eventually meant to be sacrificed, which, oh shit. Can you imagine giving birth to a kid who has these marks on them? Like, that's incredibly fucked. And evidently, some families tried to hide those kids. And it says, but for every missed sacrifice, the Abiku would send a horde of beasts and plagues to raise the continent. Which, again, not really worth it. Also, eventually, she mentions that for some reason, Songland is the only place that seems to be producing these Redemptor children. Every Redemptor in the last 500 years had been born in Songland. Even though they're meant to be born at random, that hasn't been happening. Which is highly suspect, considering they're the one country that didn't recognize this new emperor. That feels very targeted. This is clearly not arbitrary. Somebody is causing these births with these markings. Like, somebody's fucking figured it out. This isn't what it looks like. I'm just saying. Something weird's happening. This is when Kathleen says, do we have to nanny her? Can't you hire some mute nursemaid? No, the lady snapped. Once my daughter leaves Bakina House, I cannot control what she sees and hears. She must be with people I trust. And at this point, she's like, wait, I'm getting to leave the house? Are you serious? Holy shit. We're running out of time. Children are already being chosen. If we're not quick, there will be no more room on the Prince's Council. And then she breaks off and looks at her and is like, shit. And Kathleen says, don't fret. We can always make room, which I'm assuming is Kathleen being like, we could definitely murder one of the kids. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, wow, Kathleen, you sound like a nightmare. Like the way that she treats Tarisai and the way that she talks here, I'm just like, Kathleen, you suck. I don't like you. It makes sense that the lady would have these kinds of friends because she seems like she also sucks. But, you know, who knows? So my daughter's selection must happen as naturally as possible. Her ignorance will make her seem pure. The Emperor loves girls like that. It's wild to me that she is so interested in making this seem organic, but she is fine with this little girl looking like her mirror image. So they know immediately when Tarasai walks in who she's related to. It's not even like a question. And Tarasai doesn't try to hide it. She's immediately like, oh shit, do you know my mom? Like, doesn't even keep it hidden at all. So I guess that the lady was just depending completely on the fact that she wouldn't know and hope that would be enough. Because as we find out, there's a sort of like magical element to creating this council for the prince. And they have to consider people because they can't, it's not like, oh, it's just we're, you know, going to be making our selections with a vote. There's a magical contract sort of in place. And when I say that, excuse me, that immediately conjures images of the Triwizard Tournament and the incredibly poorly described magical contract that makes Harry have to compete, even though it like doesn't really make any sense because that's never been mentioned before or since. This is outlined specifically as being like there will be a curse laid on the council if we don't do what we're supposed to according to like either the gods or the fates or whatever. So we're given a lot more information about what the backlash could be if this isn't done properly. And it is very nice for there to be specific consequences like this. So here it is. Then you're making the wish today? Wu In asked. The lady nodded, and to my shock, she cupped Wu In's face just as she had cupped mine. He leaned into the touch, kissing her palm. I was jealous immediately. I feel so bad for this little girl having to be jealous of anybody who touches her mother. Like, it's so sad. I will come for you when the time is right. She patted her lap, nodding at me. For the rest of my life, I wished the universe had given me a sign then, a warning of what was about to happen. But no, the air was warm and serene, and honeybirds sang in the distance as I scrambled eagerly into my mother's arms. So, they give her this portrait of this young boy. And her question is, why is he happy? Which is very revealing to me. Her mother's like, don't you want to know who he is? And she's not asking that. She's asking, what is he enjoying? Why is he smiling? Which just points out how few reasons this little girl has had to smile. He is happy because he has everything you want. Power, wealth, legacy. His father stole those things from you and gave them to him. And Tarasai's like, all these things I want. I've never wanted any of those things. I don't understand. And I snuggled against her, forgetting the boy with his stolen happiness. I would trade all the wealth in Aristar to be held. Aritsar. Sorry, I keep saying it wrong. Aritza. To be held. Are you listening? When you meet this boy in the portrait, when you love him the most, and when he anoints you as his own, I command you to kill him. For a moment in my reflection on the portrait's surface, my eyes glowed like emeralds. Something that had slept for years rose in my belly, searing my skin like the cuff on Melu's arm had. Oh, I hate it. I feel so bad for this little girl. So then we have the travel to the palace. We find out that they have these things called lodestones, which she winds up kind of being splinched. I'm sorry, I keep bringing up Harry Potter, but you guys, it's just like a cultural touchstone that a lot of us know. So it's what happens. But yeah, she loses an arm temporarily, and it sort of like flickers and then reappears because they're only supposed to travel by lodestone like once a month, and they've been traveling once a week. And apparently, Wynn had like not really wanted to hear their concerns about it. But when her arm looks like it might fall off, he's like, all right, fine. And then they begin traveling normally with like a, cart, and a donkey. So, let's see. I'll never stay away from a window again. This is when she's arguing with Kathleen, and Kathleen says, you won't live to see another if you keep making a spectacle. You're a secret. You're not supposed to exist. Because my father's an Eru? It would not matter if your father was the devil. To the Emperor, your mother will always be the greater threat. And I'm like, I just desperately want to know who she is. I really, I'm assuming that she's like a displaced queen, or I don't know what he did to get to where he is, because the history of him that we hear is so vague. And obviously, this guy has done shady. You don't become a conqueror and not do incredibly awful things. That's just not possible. So I am waiting to find out what shitty stuff is in his past, because I'm sure it's awful. So she's talking to Wu In here in this moment, and I thought this was really interesting. Those pictures hurt you, don't they? I frowned up at him. Why didn't the map go away when you came back from the breach? Which apparently is it's unusual. He says, it says Wu In stiffened. The map will disappear when the nightmares do, he said sourly. I knew better than to ask more questions, but curiosity gnawed at me. How old had Wu In been when his parents gave him up to the Abiku? What had the underworld been like? And I'm curious if he actually went to the breach at all. I'm assuming as an adult with this map on him walking around that he must have been sent. Because of the way that he says the nightmares, I assume he went and saw awful things. But yeah, I'm curious as to how, I assumed that these kids are sacrificed and they are basically just killed or eaten or whatever the Abiku do. And the fact that some get away is pretty interesting to me. And at one point, she sees him sitting at the window at this inn that they're staying over, and she realizes that he's sobbing, crying. And he throws a cape on, leaps out the window, and then soars over the rooftops. And she asks him later, can all Songlanders fly? And he says that it's his hallow, a birth gift. And we find out that Kathleen's is that she can make herself and other people look like anybody, which it's already a huge power to be able to make yourself look like somebody, but being able to make the other person look like someone. So now you don't have to worry about a double anymore. And they don't seem to be able to control it. They can't stop her from making them look like someone else. That is incredibly powerful. That's really scary. She could make you kill the wrong person by just confusing you into thinking they were somebody else. And honestly, her being who she is, that makes me extremely nervous. And by being who she is, I mean somebody willing to kill children. Don't like it. So, okay, gotta speed this up a little bit. They get to the palace, and by this point, as a reader, you're beginning to understand that she has to be part of this council, that's like, this is basically going to be an interview process. But she doesn't understand that. She's not putting the different clues together. She doesn't really get what's happening. And she's brought in as a candidate, and she has to be separated, first of all, from her guardians. And that is the first thing that's really frightening to her, is just being completely alone. She's bathed and clothed in like a black tunic, and then given this sash that I had mentioned earlier that is patterned with elephants and herons to sort of signify what country she's from. And then gets in line with a bunch of other kids. And there's this little girl who's singing, and she begins to sort of like almost fall asleep. And the little girl is like, oh shit, I'm really sorry. I sing that to like send people to sleep or help myself fall asleep. And I forget that it has that effect on everybody. And then she says something about how, of course, first of all, that like, that's her hallow. And then that if we, the real trouble is if they like us, we never get to see our parents again until we're grown up. And Tarisai freaks out and yells, "What?" really loudly, and draws all this attention. And the girl finally sort of catches on that Tarisai does not know why she's here, and officially introduces herself. Her name is Kira. And she's like, I came here even though my parents didn't want me to, but you were sent here without them like telling you what was going on. And she reaches out to shake Tarasai's hand, and Tarasai gets like an image of her parents in this like brief contact. The only contact with anybody but her mother she's ever had. And Melu, I guess, but he's not human. And I just really found it interesting that Kira decides to like go against her parents' wishes to submit to this testing. It's interesting to me. I wonder what she feels motivated by here. Meanwhile, guards clambered down the staircase, grappling with a blonde boy with the palest skin I'd ever seen. I love this. Look, I am not going to be mad that the black woman who wrote this book was like, I'm going to make the brat who's super entitled and shitty a white boy. Sounds fair. He's yelling, "It's not fair! It's not fair! Unhand me! I was born for this! I'll send for my father!" He's a fucking Malfoy, man. I mean, just 100%. I love this so much. And I really wonder if we're going to see him again, even, or if this is just going to be the only time. You know, I assume if he was rejected, that he's just won't never like set eyes on him again. But a part of me kind of feels like, ooh, he may crop up. He feels like somebody who could be an ongoing problem. He could have a grudge that he just begins to nurture, you know? So, this is, when Kira first gets called in to do her testing, and she hangs out there for a minute and gets called in eventually herself and can't move, and they have to like shove her forward. And as she comes in, I love this. I stood in an antechamber hung with purple tapestry. A cluster of men and women sprawled on divans. I think that's called divan. I don't think I've ever said that word out loud. And high-backed chairs, murmuring softly. Matching gold circlets gleamed on their brows. Their accents were as different as their complexions, but they gave the impression of a family, or something closer. Much closer. When I entered, they turned their heads in eerie unison. And that, for me, was a really, like, nice bit of mental imagery. The idea of all of them turning their heads at the same time. And that sort of goes away. They don't continue to just behave in accord with one another. But there's a sense of their minds being connected, which we find out later is the case. Like there's something magical going on with the way that they are all intertwined. And it turns out that this dude that comes and greets her is the king. And she realizes it and just goes still and can't move. So he tells her, wash her hands in the bowl. It is custom. And she does. My fingers tingled and I wiped them on my tunic. And he says, good. And I'm like, okay, what was that? That was clearly the first test, which I'm assuming is the boy who just got carried down the stairs screaming, washed his hands and something happened when he did that. And as we find out later, everybody, like, you have to have a hallow to be a candidate, but not everybody's honest about that. They will claim they have a hallow, but they just got really good at something. They basically treated it like a trick. So he is assuming later on, when this girl steps into the light and they all see her, they know immediately who her mother is. And he's like, oh, well, she can't just like breed a child to have a hallow. That doesn't happen. And it's so rare that there's no way that this little girl just has one. And asks her, like, can you juggle? Is that what you're going to do? Like, all of these little things. So maybe that's what that boy was dealing with. And eventually they put her through a, like, sort of lie detector test with this woman. Well, first, the king is like, are you sent here to kill me? Because I want to show you something. And he gives her a knife, and she tries to stab him the way that he asks her to, and she can't. And then he lifts up the lion's mane that's like a mask around his neck and says, it's merely proof of my right to rule Aritsar, proof of the power inside me. Every stripe in the lion's mane is a death I cannot die. The only people in Aritsar who may kill me, in the universe who may kill me, are here in this room. That is the power of the ray. That power filled my father before me and fills my son now. Only a Raybearer's Council of 11 may kill him. What is that? What is a ray? What? So, at this point, she blurts out, like, what are you talking about with the 11? And everybody realizes her mother raised her to not know any of this. And they start to see what the plan must have been in choosing to raise her this way. And they're like almost impressed. Like, wow, that's actually a really good idea. But they begin to argue over whether or not they should let this girl anywhere near her, considering who her mother is. It's the law, divine law. She washed in the basin. We at least have to check if she has a hallow. If we deny her a chance, we profane holy rites. Deo's counsel could be cursed forever. Is that your suggestion? And this is when this other woman named Mbali comes forward to give her the sort of lie detector test. And she tries in her turn to get through Mbali's mind and read her past. But Mbali has like mental protections up and doesn't allow that to happen. So she asks her, did your mother send you to kill the crown prince? I've never heard of him, I said truthfully, not until today. She still hasn't put it together what she's being sent for. I feel like she should. This is the one thing that I was like, look, I get that her mother doesn't say the prince's name, doesn't like explain, because she can't give this away. She probably knows that she'll be put to the question like this. But I did feel like this little girl has to know what she's been sent here for by now, and evidently just doesn't get it. And Mbali says, Am be praised. Am is the name of their god, I think. Which is kind of a cool name. Am, just like I am, I ached to imagine that the lady might have corrupted a child. If your soul is pure, we shall strive to keep it so. And evidently, Mbali's judgment is trusted enough that everybody in the room's attitude toward her has shifted a little bit. So at this point, somebody named Nawusi is like, I don't give a shit. She's not joining the fucking council. Like, that's ridiculous. And she doesn't have a hallow, so that's it. And eventually, Tarisai has to be like, I do, though. I can see memories. And I love this. Mbali is like, all right, we'll read my memories. And the first one she tries to read is Mbali fucking one of the other dudes. And is like, okay, not that one. Hold on. She doesn't get what's happening there, but she knows, like, that's not something I'm going to talk about. And then she is... This killed me, you guys. She's like, you sang a song at a banquet that made the emperor really mad. And everybody's like, people know that you did that. I mean, yeah, it was a private banquet, but there's like, you know, we have servants and stuff that are going in and out. She could have heard that from somebody. So she puts her hand against Mbali's face again and begins to recite the whole poem. Guys, this fucking killed me. I swear to God, I was in tears at the end of this. I'm going to shorten it, obviously. There's a farmer's son with a mango tree. He keeps it in a pot by his sleeping mat. So frail, his tree. He whispers to it day and night, enjoys the perfume of its branches. Most children keep dogs, goats, chickens, but not our farmer's son, for he fears any beast that can bark or bite. This tree has no mouth. His tree has no claws. His tree depends on him, only him, for water, for light. Poor tree, he murmurs. You're too small for fruit. You're useless for the farm. You're useless for the market. You are useless to everyone but me. But the branches thicken and grow, up, up, up in one night. Poor tree. He plucks the single mango. I'm surprised you can blossom at all. This continues with it growing and growing and making more and more and more mangoes. It's just my little tree, he says. It would be dead without me. The next morning there are 20 mangoes. He hacks off every branch. It is for the tree's own good, he says. The weight would strain its little boughs. So he moves it to a smaller pot. It outgrows the pot and grows into the ground. The boy hacks, but the tree grows. The neighbors smell the mango and come to gape at the tree. What a wonder! The boy cuts the tree down. He burns her branches. The neighbors were wrong, he says, as the blaze grows high. The tree could never be useful without me. And one seed survives the flames. See it take root in the earth. See children lounge in its shadow. See as the boy's name is forgotten. You guys, I swear to God, this is just like Abuser 101. Just, yeah, I'm going to try and like keep you down and make you think you're useless. And consistently tell you it's for your good and that I'm like the only one that understands and can help and cares about you. And then it continues on without him because they are so determined. And when she comes out of this memory and turns and looks at the emperor, he is looking at her, as she says, with cold, simmering hatred. And I'm like, okay, is that supposed to be a story about this country and the emperor? Because it feels like it. It feels like he feels called out, you know? So at this point, there is a moment where Nawusi brings her an apple. And we know this apple is poisoned. It's a very, it's obvious she's doing something shady. And she's like intending, I think, to see if she survives eating it, which I think she might. But I don't know. I don't really know what the deal is with her being half human. And Tarasai is about to take a bite out of it when Mbali steps forward and knocks it out of her hand and is like, I don't think so. I'm not going to stand here and let you poison a kid. And Tarasai is like, you what? And starts crying. And eventually they're like, look, we need to let her through. Like, this is part of the whole test. We're going to bring you through. And in order to finish this remotely on time, I'm going to have to jump ahead here. But she gets brought into the children's palace, which sounds rad as hell. And there is Kira, who has made it through. I'm assuming that she and Kira are going to make it to the end. And they are looking for the prince, and none of them know where he is. But Tarisai immediately is like, oh, I know, I understand. Because she grew up very isolated in her way, the same way that the prince probably would be. And she's like, he's not in this room. Like, as much as there's lots of kids around and they're in, like, you know, sometimes in like little outfits and whatnot. She's like, he's not hiding here. There's too many people. And they go to this seemingly sort of almost empty room. And this is where he's hiding. And Bali raised an eyebrow. How do you know? It's where I would hide. It's so open that no one would look very hard. One of the curtains wrinkled more than the others. I approached it, spying dark brown toes and the tips of golden sandals. Don't worry, I said softly. I won't tell the others. Then I drew back the curtains. A young Oluwani boy stood before me, parting his full lips in a curious, familiar smile. I saw red. Heat tore through me, and my pulse thrummed with the same word over and over and over. Kill. I can't tell you guys how heartbroken I was. This little girl deserves better. I hate this for her. I hope she can overcome this somehow. I don't know how that would work. Is there a way that she can, like, kill him, but he comes back to life? So she, like, kind of fulfilled her deal, but also he's still alive. I just feel really bad. I mean, obviously, she hasn't been anointed as one of his own, so she can't kill him yet. But the fact that that impulse is there right away was surprising to me. I kind of thought it would be dormant entirely until whenever the point was and would catch her by surprise. Evidently not. So I guess we'll have to see. So it's time for me to wrap. Thank you again very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this. I'm enjoying it so much. And next episode will be Friday, so I hopefully will see you guys then. Hope you're enjoying it. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.